of you know, we have been using APA 6th edition at Westcliff University, and just recently APA has updated. So now there is a 7th edition available, and Westcliff will begin using APA 7th starting summer 6th session. We do ask that you have a little bit of leniency with your students as they are shifting into a different format, and help guide them in the process, but there will be a plethora of resources available for them as well as they're shifting over into this edition. One of the primary changes with 7th edition is that there is now a professional version and a student version. So the professional version is essentially for publication purposes, and the student version has been adapted to meet the context needs of students being within a university. So things in 6th edition, like having to write running head at the top of their papers, never really made sense because of the context. So they've adapted to make it a little bit more intuitive or user-friendly, you could say. But if you do get questions about it, there are 2 different versions, and Westcliff is asking students to use the student version. One of the rationales behind offering this tutorial series for our faculty is that within the rubric that for assignments that have a writing component, there is the formatting section, sometimes once or twice, where it refers to correct APA format. We hope to get everyone on the same line of thinking with this, so having the same standards of what it means to correctly format a paper in APA. So this tutorial will cover the basics, as well as point out some of the changes from 6th to 7th edition, and I will also attach resources for you that you can refer to as you are learning about the changes of APA. So first things first, the title page. You'll notice there is no longer a title in the header. All students need to have is the page number justified to the right. Underneath that, and tab down a bit, comes the title. This is written in title case, and it is bolded. Now notice with title case, major words are capitalized. This now includes if you have a hyphenated word, that second portion is also capitalized. So it wouldn't be e-commerce with a lowercase c. And last but not least, it is centered. Now all the information on the title page will be centered. After the title comes the author's name or student name, Westcliff University, course code, course name, professor's name, as well as the date written as seen here. This is going to be double-spaced. There is one extra space after the title itself. In the second page, APA does not require students to have an abstract. So if that is something that you want for one of their assignments, you will need to explicitly state and write that within their assignment guidelines, because if not, it's not required, and they cannot be marked down for not having it. It's not assumed that it should be included. So the second page will look something like this. They will rewrite the title, same thing where it's bold, centered, and title case, and then the introduction comes after that. They do not write the heading introduction, solely the title of the paper. The first line is indented throughout the entirety of the paper. It is double-spaced. And one small change is that there only needs to be one space after the period as opposed to 2. Common headings that you will see, this is a first level heading, centered, bolded, title case. And then the second level is justified to the left, title case, bolded. Third, justified to the left, title case, bolded, and italicized. One note with title case, essentially what this means is major words are capitalized. You have the first word after the colon or some form of punctuation. Major words, even if they're after a hyphen, and then if there are words of 4 letters or more, they would also be capitalized. Here's an example. So there's my first word, it's capitalized. It's also a main word. This is a main word, first word after the colon, 4 letters, so it's capitalized. Major word after the hyphen, it's also capitalized, and also a major word. Okay, with in-text citations, I'm talking about paraphrasing or summarizing here. All that is needed is the author's name and the year. So if you have a parenthetical citation or a citation at the end of a sentence, it looks like so. Author's last name, comma, and the year. Here's an example of it in text. Please note that the period comes at the end of the parentheses, not at the end of the sentence. With a narrative citation, students are able to start their sentence by referring to the author, and the only thing that goes in parentheses is the year. If there is no date, they simply write N period D period. With quotations, the only thing that changes is that they now need to have the page number, and they obviously are also using the double quotation marks. There is a space after the period, P period, space 7. With a narrative citation, same thing, but they can separate. So author's last name, information about the date comes in parentheses, and the page number is the only thing that goes at the end of the sentence. Some basic in-text rules. So if you have two authors, they are separated by only an ampersand. It would look like so with that ampersand, but if you were writing a narrative citation, so you're referring to them in text, you use the word and. An example here, you can see parenthetical ampersand, and here you can see we're writing and in text. If there are 3 or more authors, so this is a change with 7th edition, 3 or more, you use et al., which simply means and others. So it would look like so. Hong et al. Period comes only after the all, still have the comma to separate. Here is a narrative citation. Again, period only comes after the all. Now, if you're using one work by the same author, so an example would be like this. Akins was the first author in both of these references that I want to use in my paper. Technically, it would be Akins et al. How we would distinguish them is you would list as many authors as would allow a reader to distinguish who you were referring to. So here I would list till Hill, and then I use my et al. And here I would do the same. I would list till Cowie, and then I would use my et al. Now I can distinguish the two. There's a group author, name of the group followed by the year. Parenthetical would look like so, and narrative would look like so. Title case with a group name. If there are multiple works, they are placed in alphabetical order. So you can see here, these are alphabetized, and they are separated by a semicolon. If there is no author, you're going to use the title of the work. Now, a tip with this is if it's italicized in the reference list, you keep it italicized in a citation. If it's not, then you use double quotation marks. So an example of a book without an author would be Language Learning. I italicize it because book titles are italicized in my reference list, but do note that this is written in title case, whereas in the reference section, it is not. Article with no author would look like so. Article titles are not italicized so in the reference section. So here I have it in quotation marks, and again, it's title case, even though in the references it is not. If the title is long, students have the ability to shorten it as long as you can distinguish which reference it's applying to. Now there are 2 types of quotations. You have short quotations and long quotations. I'm only going to focus on short ones because we do not recommend the use of long quotations. Most of the papers that students are writing do not warrant them, and for the majority, when they integrate them, they're using the quotes to speak for themselves as opposed to support themselves. So with short quotations, the citation is not inside of the double quotation marks. You can see it's separated there. Additionally, the period goes after the parentheses, not at the end of the quote. So you'll never see it look like so. It should only be included right there after the parentheses. Another thing to note is that students should always be introducing their quotes. A quote cannot be its own sentence. So they can do that like so, using their own words before the quotation, or they can refer to the author. And they can do that simply by stating according to. So according to Lightbound and Spada, and begin the quote, or just referring to the authors and an action verb after that. Quotes that span multiple pages would look like so, PP, and then there's a dash between the pages. If there's no page number for a quoted phrase, There are multiple acceptable approaches with this. So they can indicate the heading or the section name. So you see here, same initial information, author's last name, the year, and then here is the section. The section title is in title case and section itself is lowercase. They can indicate an abbreviated heading. So let's say here was a group name or a private organization. The year, and then in quotation marks is that abbreviated heading. The reason it's in quotations is because it is abbreviated, so it indicates this to the reader. They can also do that by counting the paragraphs down and writing it as para, or doing both, a heading section and a paragraph number. So here you see I have my section, teaching methodology section, and it's paragraph 3 in that. It's up to the author. It's their discretion which approach will be best to help their readers find the quotation. There's a quote within a quote. You have the double quotation marks to start, and then it's the single quotation marks within where it was actually quoted in the work they're referencing, and it ends with the double quotation marks. Tables and figures. So tables and figures are now formatted in parallel, and they will look like so. So you have the heading. This is bold. This refers to the number of the table. Or the figure, and then there's a title underneath it. It is italicized and it is title case. If these were taken from a source, that's included in the note underneath, and I have 2 examples there for how to do that. I will also provide you with a sheet where you can look at those more closely, but that's just a basic overview. Best practice with these is that each table and figure should be introduced in the text right before the data is actually incorporated, and then after the integration of that data, it should be analyzed or at least referenced. So the author points out what the reader is to determine from that table. The reader should not have to determine that on their own. With writing style, they is now accepted as a singular noun. So if the gender is unknown or the gender is irrelevant in what is being stated, you can use they. So here's an example. The culprit is unclear, but he, she. Now we could say the culprit is unclear, but they must have been here since 5 o'clock this morning. Bias-free language. So the guidelines have been updated to reflect best practices with this. A couple of examples. There's a lot of examples incorporated in the manual, but here's a couple of them. Person-first language. So saying a woman with diabetes as opposed to a diabetic. Avoiding using adjectives as noun to describe the groups of people. So instead of European people, instead of the Europeans, you would say European people, or instead of drug users, people who use drugs, for example. And then specific labels, as specific as possible. So instead of just saying Asian Americans, being specific, Korean Americans. And then with formatting, a couple of things. So quotations are used for linguistic examples or for emphasis. So you can see here in the example, I quote, agree or disagree, instead of putting it in italics like so. This hasn't changed, but acronym use, write out the full form first, and then the acronym should come in parentheses, not the other way around. Students should really only be doing this if they're going to use the acronym at least 3 times after they define it like so. Place periodical tables in quotations in text. So you can see like so, and so this is an example of what I tell students to do with their ALAs or the DQs where they're summarizing an article, is this is how they should start. So you might see this. The article is in quotation marks, the comma comes in those quotation marks, and the title of the periodical is in title case, even though in the reference you can see it is not. Word forms, so you would write out the word form of numbers if it's between 0 and 9, if you want to start a sentence with it, or if it's just a common fraction. So you can see examples here. Font requirements are a lot looser. Pretty much anything that's readable is permissible. So you can see here I'm writing in Garamond, here I'm writing in Schiller. That's probably not the best choice to make. So I do hope that that has helped. I did go fairly fast through it to give you as much information as possible. There is a part 2 to this where we'll focus on references, but feel free to reach out to me at any time, writinghelp@westcliff.edu, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.